Guru Nation, welcome back. Thank you so much for watching. This is a special interview, and if you're listening, also, obviously, thank you for listening, just consuming the content. So I'm about to announce, but for those of you watching and listening, you hear first, the Versatile is going to sponsor the podcast and the videos, and they're going to help me with guests. And this is a guest, Stacey Hoffman. I can't believe I never interviewed you or really looked at your profile for any reason. Like, you should have been on this show years ago for what you've been doing in this industry. You're exactly what a large core of my audience is striving to become. And so you went from CNA to project manager. So Stacy is now project manager for a very large CRO with a public health specialty. So it's like a special contract for public health that CRO outsources to people like you just for the
Mhm.
public health positions and contracts, the government contracts basically.
Yep.
So your journey, I mean, I'm just gonna guess you've seen a lot. Like you you've seen a
Yeah,
lot on
it's
your journey.
yes, yeah. And it was actually something I never thought I would end up in research. It wasn't my career path. I wanted to be a nurse. That was my
Mhm.
goal. Um, so I started as a CNA, and I had worked for a medical travel agency, and I tried to gain as much clinical experience as I could. So I had met it was the daughter of one of the residents that I took care of at the nursing home. She was friends with a lady who was the administrative assistant of one of the hospitals in the town next to us. And I told her, I was like, man, I would really love to work at a psych unit. I was just really into
Mhm.
that. And she goes, well, I know that administrative assistant. So I had an interview the next day. So
So that right there is networking, what you just did
100%.
early in your
100%.
career. You
Yes,
probably didn't even
I've
know it was networking.
yeah, networking has always been my thing.
Mhm.
So get this interview, and it wasn't within a month I was moving, to go and live close to there. And I started working there. The doctor that would come up to see the patients, would see, I guess my work ethic, and he says, comes up one day, he starts talking to me, and he's like, do you want to work in my office? And I was like, well, that's kind of forward. Um,
They had an
and I
office.
was
This is actually
like,
very common for people that don't know, like at these skilled nursing facilities or psych units, the psychiatrists on staff, they make rounds, but they also usually have private practices and things like that.
yeah. And his office was across the street from the hospital.
Mhm.
And so I was like, okay, sounds fun. Let's do it. And so I would work, part time at the hospital and the other part at his office. And then I took, because I was still working for that, travel agency, and I would just do that on the weekends. So I was doing like, these three things. Well, at his office, I got trained on how to draw blood, because he'd done that some. And so anytime I could pick up an extra little skill, here and there, and they did ECGs in his office. So I kind of did that and,
Mhm.
vital signs, but it was just little things. I mean, most of the people he sent to the hospital to do it, but if I could
Right.
pick up something because I wanted to be a nurse, that was what I wanted to do. And so also working for this agency, they're like, well, we need somebody that can do our CPR classes. So I went and I got certified as an American Heart Association CPR instructor. And I'm like, good, this is something else I can put on my
Wow.
nursing belt. And so I was like, well, I need to, go back to school. So I'm here, I'm working three jobs. One of them is a travel job, going to school in the evenings. And I mean, sometimes I'm doing, my homework in hotel rooms. I'm using McDonald's to get free Wi-Fi, to do
Wait,
like
when
my
was this? Like, what year was this?
2006, around
Wow.
2006, long time. I'm 40 years. I just turned 40 years old. So, I mean, I've been doing this
We're
a
the same
while.
age. We're the same age. I noticed by your email.
Yeah. So yeah, so I mean, I was doing final exams, in McDonald's parking lots, and
Wow.
um I was living in an apartment. Sometimes I would drive around apartment and, back then nobody secured their internets, you know what I mean? So
Right.
I could, like, pull up in front of somebody's apartment and do my homework, that way. Um
Scrappy.
I did.
Scrappy. Young
I did what I
Stacy
had
was
to do,
scrappy.
I couldn't afford it, to have my own.
Are you still
So
scrappy today?
no, no, God, no, are you kidding me? Come on. I mean, yeah,
You don't
in
lose
certain
it.
ways,
You
but I
don't
don't
lose
steal
it.
internet. I don't
Nah,
steal
nah, not
internet.
stealing internet, but finding ways.
But
Basically, it's
I
finding
am
ways to get
very
things done.
resourceful, and
Yeah.
I do what I need to do to get things done. Absolutely.
Hmm.
You got to think outside the box, you know, and I think that's what makes me so good at my job, you know, especially in project management. I mean, you cannot do good by always, sticking with, well, this is, what they said I had to do. And it's like, no, 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 no. There are always different ways. There are always ways that you can do things to get things done. You know what I mean? Um, I had to do that my whole life,
So, but
you
when was
know?
your first like foray into research, clinical research?
So, so here I am working for this medical agency, and they said, hey, this research facility, it was a phase one, first in human clinic. They need 10 people to help out with a study. They don't want to hire people because they'll have to lay them off after the study is over. So I was like, I'll do it. I know how to draw blood. I know how to do vitals. I know how to do ECGs because I did it in this doctor's office, right?
Right.
So I get sent there, and this 2 week or so job turned into 8 months. And at the end of that 8 months, they're like, can we just buy out your contract with this agency? And I'm like, you know what? School's getting a little rough. It was
Mm.
kind of towards the end. I'm getting ready to graduate soon, and be nice to stay in one spot for a while.
What
And
was your degree gonna be in? Nursing
um,
or?
so, like I said, I wanted to be a nurse,
Mm.
and very competitive back then. So I couldn't get in the nursing program. I got denied. I got denied
Mm.
twice. So I transitioned over to USI because I thought, well, it's a bigger school. So I'll apply to that program. Did every class I needed up to the nursing classes. Got denied again. And I'm like, you've
Wow.
got to be kidding me.
All
So I
while
went
working
in,
in research, basically, like
yeah.
as an assistant,
And
basically a research assistant at this point, right?
yeah. So I walked into the office of the administration or whatever, and I'm crying, and I'm like, what degree am I the closest to get? I don't even care what it is, just. So they're like, health administration, you've got all the experience, and I'm like, fine. So that's what I got my bachelor's degree in, was that.
Ah,
And
sounds like me in college too. I dropped out
um
thinking I'd go to med school and no one took me in and I had to go back to U of A and hat in hand and basically said the same thing. What is it? And they told me it's molecular cellular bio. I said, okay, I'll finish.
Yeah, and that's the thing, I'm not stupid, it was just because I traveled and
I
I did
see.
what I had to do, and I had A's and B's, and in order to get in these programs, you had to have straight A's, you know what I mean?
Hmm.
Um,
But
and
back
it
at the
was
site though, like the site, they must have seen something in you to want to buy out your contract.
mhm,
Looking
yeah,
back now, because I know at the time it's probably hard to figure it out, but looking back now, knowing what you know now, because you're in a
yeah.
position of leadership too, what did you think they saw in you at that time?
So in order to succeed, especially in a phase one clinic, integrity is huge, huge, probably the most important thing. And you have to be very detail oriented. And I don't know if you know a whole lot about, people that work in, travel contracts, but sometimes they're not really in it for the long term. You
Right.
know, they kind of want it for the quick money. We're going to work a couple shifts and then move on. Well, I was a full time employee with this place. So when they sent me, this was my job, and I went and I put 110% in, you know, and I wanted to do the best job that I could do when I walked in. And um I I ran. Like, I mean, it was just like everything was fast paced. And the minute that you walk in the door, you're on this study doing, these blood rounds, you're on this study doing these, you're on this study doing these. And I'm a good stick, you know what I mean? Like, I can draw blood really well. And um,
That's a
it was
really
just
important skill that is not discussed enough in our industry, where there's so many blood draws for a lot of these studies, and
yeah.
oftentimes just like if you're a phlebotomist, people who are phlebotomists, CNAs, MAs that know how to draw blood, they don't understand how valuable they actually are
Yeah.
to get
Yeah.
started at a clinic, because
Mhm.
there's some tough sticks out
Oh
there.
yeah.
You don't need to
Oh,
know anything about research to get a tough stick and
well,
work in
and
research.
what makes it rough too is, at some of these clinics, you get people that come often. So their veins have been used,
Mm. Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
especially if they go and donate plasma, you get the veins that have been used for plasma, quite a bit. So that can make it difficult, to get
Yeah,
blood. Um, so you have to know tricks. And
right.
it's one of those things you become very good, what you do,
I love
working in
that.
those kind of places.
So how did you transition, I guess, from that's another thing, people that are just watching, this is why I'm glad we have you on. They don't understand, at the right company, you can level up very quickly. So you can go from, hey, Stacy, you're a great blood draw, to, hey, we need help with data entry. We need help with the IP logs. It just, you start
So
doing more and more until you become a coordinator without realizing it.
yeah. So my transition was unique. Okay. So um I came in with that agency as just a research tech, right? But when I got my contract bought out, they actually hired me as a clinic scheduler.
Ah,
Now that position is very, it's awesome. Now, what I loved so much about it is I got to use my brain, because it's not just a position where, oh, I'm just going to schedule people Monday through Friday, blah, blah, blah. It's very deep. It's very puzzle. It's you're taking every study that you've got, you're putting it together, you're putting people on these intervals, so you got a dose at 8, 8:04, 8:08, like all this. And then you got the blood, the vitals, the ECG, all of these things. But all the other studies have to commingle with this. And so you got someone working this round, they got to run to the next one, run to the next one. It's just a big chaotic,
mm.
beautiful mess, right? And that was my job. And the thing that, and as crazy as it is for me to carry this with me as long as I have, I talked with somebody just the other day about it. It was a position that I held that I wasn't liked very much, by some of my coworkers, because you have to be um kind of, you have to treat everybody fair. Like, you can't play favorites. So if somebody says, well, I don't like doing this because, this person's better at that than this, or, things like that. Well, just because you don't like it, I can't not put you on it,
Mm.
or, you know what I mean? Um,
Wow. So it's basically like a mini project manager in a sense, because you're like allocating human resources towards specific time points for
it's,
projects.
I mean, I wouldn't consider myself a project manager because, we had, like study managers that did that.
Yeah.
But when I go to like put the people on things, it's like they would have preferred that, maybe the intervals be longer. Like, so,
Uh,
instead of it being like a 4-minute interval, maybe a 5-minute interval, so they
I
had more time to
see.
breathe in
So you made
between.
them hustle.
Yeah, but the thing is, though, they were so good. They were so good, and I'm like, "Listen, if you weren't so good at it, you know, it's like."
Why was the pushback? I mean, it's makes sense, but like, were there not incentives for them at the company to incentivize like more hustle? Like, it's essentially like you were creating hustle culture and there was some pushback, right, from the
So,
staff.
I mean, at the end of the day, I mean, I'm not the one that started it as far as that goes. Like, you
Mm,
know, it came down, you
mm,
know. Um, it saved money
mm-hmm.
because the shorter the amount of rounds that you had, then the more that you could add on, the more studies you
Right.
could take on, the more, um, and then it meant like the less amount of openings that you would have to bring people in to cover things, right? Um, but it didn't mean that, you know, I didn't like them, or that I was some kind of evil person, or,
Right.
you know, and
But the previous, you said it was called scheduler, right? So the
mhm,
previous scheduler to you must have uh abided by like what these
it was
coordinators, I'm guessing,
it was
requested.
different. I changed things when I
Ah,
came.
you're a change agent. So management love you.
um, so yeah, I mean, things were adapted, kind of like I said, I mean, it was make things more efficient.
But you were doing it not to be mean. You were doing it
No,
because that's something you would have wanted to do had the roles been reversed. Like you'd be run, you love the chaotic environment. You'd be running around loving that.
I mean, like I said, it was about efficiency,
Hmm, hmm.
and improvement, and um, I mean, it was so efficient that even management had sent me to another facility to do the same thing there.
Wow.
You know,
So how did you go?
so
What was next from patient scheduler? Like how long did that last to, I'm guessing like coordinator, right? Or
so I was there for 6 years in that role.
and as a scheduler for six
Yeah,
years? Wow.
yeah,
And were you happy with that?
loved it, loved it.
I see. Did they pay
Um,
you fairly for like for your needs, or
so
did you feel
now
like you wanted more?
Now let me tell you, I was young, okay? Everybody that I worked with was young. And
Was this oh
I
six,
huh?
oh six, oh seven, around that
Y-
time?
yeah, well, no, this was
Okay.
2012 when I started there in 2010. So
Okay.
this was when I left there, it was like 2015, 2016,
Oh
something like that.
wow. Okay.
Um, but where I lived at, the cost of living is super low.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So the amount of money I believe that we all made, we were pretty happy with, and nobody really bucked up to it. So
Mm.
it wasn't until I transferred to Nashville that I realized that, okay, maybe I need to be bumped up. But it wasn't that I was upset with anything I made where I
Right.
was at.
Right.
I just knew, okay, cost of living is different here.
You were okay with it because it's a stable job, you enjoy it, and it's more than enough to cover your expenses.
I bought my first house on
Wow.
that salary, and
Wow.
I was alone, you know what I mean?
Wow.
So, I mean, I was totally okay with it. You know what I
You
mean?
remind me of Casey Figueroa, that had my one of my for my still my employee, but she was my site director at one point. So what made you go to Nashville then from this
So,
like
I
cozy
met
place?
my now husband.
Ah,
He's in the Army,
it was
and
a
he
dude.
was
It was a dude.
right, right. And he was stationed at Fort Campbell in Kentucky. Well, Kentucky, Tennessee, whatever you want to call it.
Okay.
Um, and so I didn't want to leave Covance. So I
That was
found
Covance.
It was
Okay.
Covance, yeah.
Nice.
And so I was like, man, I don't want to leave, but found out that Covance has an office in Nashville. So that was an hour from where he lived. And I was like, you know what? I'll just commute. No big deal.
Covance has offices everywhere. Now they're called LabCorp, right? Or they're still called Covance?
LabCorp Drug Development, but up until March, now they're going to be called Fortrea.
That's terrible. The side note, that's just dumb. Look, and they're not gonna listen to me anyways, but as a sidebar, Covance, I always got the impression anecdotally from conversation I had, just like with people like you and at conferences, they were the ones that really like from the big CROs that cared about quality of life for their staff. Like that was not just lip service. And yeah, the pay was slightly less, but compared to the other big CROs, their quality of life, they have a brand reputation. That's just, in my opinion, a dumb move. I'm sure it's a good reason for it, but the name change is dumb.
Covance, I owe my career to that place.
I heard so many
And
good things.
yeah. Obviously every place has, its goods or its bads, but they as a company done so many things for me that they did not have to do. So
Mm.
anybody can say what they will. My personal experience is that I will never say a bad thing about that company. You
Yeah,
know,
yeah.
I mean,
Most employees, I'm telling you, Stacy, like they were on to something. Hopefully it continues, but I
yeah,
haven't been keeping up. So, okay, you met your soon-to-be husband. You
yeah.
had to transfer. You asked internally, "Hey, I know you guys got locations
Mhm.
at other places. Do you have anything for me here?" And
Yeah.
they were smart
So,
and kept you, right?
right. So I transferred to Nashville and I took a job. It was a clinical project administrator role. It was a step back.
Step back.
Um,
It
it
sounds
was a
more
step
fancy.
back. And yeah, I wish it was. It was, again, I'm still learning in this industry at this point. Like, I didn't really know much about career growth. I didn't really know much about, you know, research. I still have nurse,
Wait,
it's
wait. At
like,
this point, so 6 years you worked as a scheduler. Did you ever enter data in EDC or answer a query or anything
no,
like that?
everything was paper. Everything was paper at that facility we were at.
But you were
So,
hands-on on like source docs and
uh-huh.
reg. Okay,
Hmm.
okay,
Yep.
okay,
But it was all paper. Like we didn't have anything electronic.
okay.
Now, I mean, we did have two document like doc review staff that
Hmm.
they entered stuff that, like the sponsors would give them that was electronic. But as far as us, like we didn't do that. Like
I
everything was
gotcha.
on paper. So we
Hmm.
would fill it out on paper and give it to them, and then they would input stuff.
Hmm.
Um, so anyway, I take this role, and even my new manager, she was like, "Yeah, I know this is a little bit of a step back, but when something else opens, we'll slide you in there." And this facility was either you were in a CRA route or you in study startup route.
Hmm.
And I had already traveled for 6 years with this medical travel agency that it's kind of over the travel thing, you know. Um,
Makes sense.
and I didn't really know anything about startup. Like, what is startup? What is that? Like, and I was in the role like 8 months or so when my husband finds out he's getting PCS in North Carolina. And I'm like, what the heck? So
That's what happens when you marry military. You don't know where you're
I
gonna end.
know. So this is one of the situations where I tell you that Covance done something for me that they didn't have to do. They allowed me, one, to transition into a role before I was in one for a year. And then number two, I got a role that I was not even close to being qualified for
Mm.
because I had been in clinical for almost 7 years and I switched into a startup position.
Study startup,
Study
which is
startup.
super important to this day. That's like it's
Yes.
such a good role. Now, when
Yeah.
you transferred, they must have like done it because they loved you and they saw
That's
potential.
what HR said. I had had an impeccable record and, all of this,
Yeah.
and they had signed off to allow me to be remote, even though that was not
Ah,
a remote position.
way before it was a trend, like
Yeah,
a main
yeah.
strategy.
So you
Mm.
tell me that's not a great company.
No, that
You know
I
what I mean?
everything I've heard about Covance, it's like was my favorite CRO, still is.
Yeah.
I don't get that many studies with them anymore. I don't know why.
Mhm.
I wish you could bring them back to I don't know
Yeah.
what's going on. I gotta look into what's happening with them. But
Yeah.
that's crazy story with Covance.
Yeah.
That's so study start
So,
did your salary did so the cost of living must have been higher in North Carolina than
yeah.
where you were.
So my new manager, she must have realized there was a disconnect with the
Mm.
salary because um she jumped it up a lot, like a lot, to where I was like, "Holy cow, was something wrong with my salary because this is weird, you know?"
Yeah.
Um, and I was like, "All right, okay, I'll take it, right?" And so, I worked as a startup specialist 2, and then I will mention, every position that I've ever had, even, back in my pre-research days, I've always been a trainer. I've always been somebody that's wanted to help develop other people. And I've always worked to work into the next role that I've wanted before I was ever into it. You know,
Did you let that happen organically, or did you already figure out the route before you even got the next job?
usually it fell on me like prior until I realized so when I got into startup, that's when I was like, okay, career growth in research. That's when I kind of started seeing a path.
Okay.
Prior to that, I didn't even really look at research as a career because I was still unsure on what is research, like what, because I was still so blinded on where my life was at, what it was doing. Nursing was what I wanted. Like I focused my whole life on that, you know? So it's weird, I know.
Research will
But
have a way to do that. It'll take what you thought were your plans and say, well, welcome
yeah,
to this rabbit hole.
yeah. So it wasn't until, I got that first startup job that I was like, okay, startup, this is way different. I felt like I was in a completely different world because clinical and startup, totally different.
Hmm.
And that's when I enrolled in my master's program, clinical research management, because I'm like, I still need something clinical in my life. And
Do you feel like that was a good, looking back now, that master's degree in clinical research? Do you feel like that was a good investment?
in what I do today,
Hmm.
abso-freaking-lutely.
Ah, okay. There's a
Absolutely.
pro degree, but you didn't do it prior to starting in the industry. Like a lot of
No,
people fall for, okay, well, I
no,
can't get experience, so let me just get this
no.
master's degree.
You know what? I'm so glad you said that.
Mm,
Like, I am so thankful that I did not get any of the education prior to getting into research
mm,
because when I was in my master's program, and this is was very eye-opening. I was in that program with people who had double masters, PhDs, education that blew me out of the water, could not get their foot in the door in research and couldn't understand why because they
yep,
had no experience. But yet they did not want to take an entry level position because they felt like I've got
exactly.
this education here.
I get that on a
And
daily basis, and nothing's changed.
yeah,
It's maybe worse now.
yeah. And so when I talk to people, because I mean, I review resumes all the time on LinkedIn and I give, advice all the time. And, I always have to say, like, I understand your education may be here, but your experience is here. So just take something entry level for a year and a half, to just give yourself a little bit of a
You know what it
background.
is? There's an archetype of people, like a large majority of them fall into this space where, let's say they have a master's degree, but no research experience, but their friends, all their friends, family, they watch our videos. They're like, oh, I could be a CRA. And yeah, you can. But rather than going out and starting at a site level or maybe starting as like a study startup or something at a CRO that's not a CRA, they won't do it. So
Yeah.
instead, because it's a lot of work and they have to get out of their comfort zone. So instead, this is the mentality that, okay, well, I'll just get a PhD. Like, I'll just keep getting degrees until someone hires me.
Yeah.
And that's actually a very good way to go into debt and
Yeah.
need a job ASAP to start paying off all these student loans. They're not cheap.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I've been trying. June will be 2 years that I've been trying to help a friend of mine who has a master's degree in nursing get into research. I have got a heck of a network. I can't get anybody to give her a chance.
Is it because she doesn't want to start lower than what she thinks she is, or is it
No,
because,
no, no, no. She's
huh?
willing to do an entry level position,
Wow.
but it's like people look at the degree and automatically think that she's going to expect way too much money, so they won't even look at her. You know what I mean?
Yeah. No, I know.
It's Yeah,
As a site owner, I somebody like that master's degree comes to me and say, I want to be start from the bottom. I'm like, okay, well, how long is that gonna last? Once you
mhm,
get 3 months of experience with your degree, you're out.
yep, yep.
Wow.
So, yeah, it's unfortunate, but,
Hmm. More
I
needs to be discussed about that, I think.
mhm,
That's
yeah,
like a separate podcast in and of itself. So,
100%.
startup specialist, North Carolina. Did you like it, and how long did it last?
So I'm the kind of person I have to have something that drives me, right? And so the scheduling job that drove me mentally, puzzly, right? The startup job wasn't until I started learning how to do timelines that I'm like, that's my why, you know, because it gave me that challenge of, all right, I can set these dates. Now I got to beat them, you know?
Mhm.
So it's like I found my drive and my passion for that. And, once I started, really getting good at making those, I mean, I can make a timeline down to the day, like,
What do you use to do that? Like what?
so, I mean, it all comes down to the detailed questions that you ask the site, you know.
Okay.
Um, I mean, I've got a laundry list of questions.
As a startup
Um,
specialist, right?
as a specialist. I mean, I obviously had to do it as as an SUPM as well, because sometimes the specialists don't know what to ask, you know.
Right.
Um,
We'll get to there.
but
We'll get to there.
yeah. So, I mean, it's just, dealing with all the processes, any committees, all of that kind of stuff. Like, what are all the ins and outs that your site has to go through to get up and running? Um,
You
so
typically interact with coordinators, right?
yeah. Hmm.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yep.
Um, but let me tell you, I mean, COVID hurt a lot. That hurt a lot. Um, Pre-COVID, it was a lot easier to interact with coordinators. I felt like the
Mm.
relationship that you could build with the site was a lot easier. Um, After COVID, it was more like mobile. I found myself grabbing my cell phone and texting coordinators like, hey, when you get back to your desk, can you send me the 1572?
And they text you back?
Are you kidding me? Uh,
This startups
uh,
that we work with a few. I have a small site here in Yuma, and I have 3 coordinators now. And yeah, I tell them like, hey, and they're all brand new. Now they're like a
yeah.
year into it, but study startup, they're gonna ask you for stuff. Let's make sure we get like our site is small. Let's get us up and
Mhm.
running, activated quickly. We only have like one sub by on these studies. It's not that hard.
Yeah.
Let's just do it.
Yeah.
And so they're learning study startup
Yeah.
on the other side from the site side.
You know, and I did a lot though as a specialist. I mean, I handheld a lot. You know, I'm not
Mhm.
gonna lie. You know, I sent a lot of stuff DocuSign. That way they could quickly just send it back.
Ah,
You know, I mean, they could, if they had DocuSign on their phone, they could electronically sign it from their phone and send it back to me. You know, just anything I could do to help expedite the process.
right.
I don't feel like a lot of people do that in this industry. You know,
Is it
I've
because their
noticed.
SOPs don't let them, or they just treat
No,
it like a job?
no, no, I think it's that. I think it's, you know, just send an email and wait. Send an email and wait.
How many people? This is gonna be a weird question for you to answer, but try to just remove yourself from you for a second and look at you as a employee objectively. How many people like you are there in this industry? Like what percentage? Are you like top 20% of the
Um,
efficiency, or I didn't even know what the word would be, like just getting
you
things
know
done?
what? You know what? I've got a lot of amazing colleagues that I've worked with. Um, you know, I don't know everybody, you know, so I mean
Hmm.
I can't
Just from
put
what
every
you've seen enough.
um if I could put like a percentage of like, you know, top tier of SUPMs and specialists,
Hmm.
um, and this would be, you know, SUPMs that actually held the specialist position because there's a difference.
Yeah,
You know
yeah,
the difference, you
yeah.
know? Um, I'd say maybe 40%,
Top four? That's very generous.
you know?
Okay. Top
And
40, not bottom
but
40.
and now it matters on, you know, workload, you know,
Yeah, yeah.
because, you know, there are some CROs you get loaded down, you know, and you got so many studies, you don't have time, you know, to go the extra mile
Right. They
you
sometimes like,
want
and
to,
this
you
is the
know.
criticism of most CROs that Covan somehow did not fall victim to, where they just overburden their staff rather than investing in training new people to have enough human resources. They take the ones that know what they're doing and they just load them up, load them to the gills with more work. Oh, what Covan's actually, from what I understand, they did a fairly good job at this kind of managing workload.
You know, so train Cobians had it was a very good environment to have people like train you, you know.
Mhm.
I'm not saying it was, you know, perfect all the time, um because sometimes, you know, if you happen to join at the wrong time where you know people were busy, you know, you may not get onboarded like somebody else or whatever, but um like I said, I was always, you know, I was never too busy to train somebody, you know. But you know, like I said,
If
COVID hurt.
let's get
And
to, if we don't shift from Covance, they're gonna sponsor you soon.
I
They
know,
they
I
that's
know,
all.
right?
It's been great.
I
So
know, we gotta stop.
what made you leave Covance?
Oh God,
Can you
that's a
talk
loaded
about it?
question. That's a loaded question. Um, I never thought I would leave that company.
You were gonna be a lifer.
I would have been a lifer.
This is
I would have
important.
been.
This is important for any CROs watching. I don't care who you are, any companies. Why was Stacy? If Stacy were my employee,
You're
I
gonna make
would,
me cry. You're gonna make me tear up.
from what I
This
know
is
about you, I would try to make you a lifer with one of my organizations. So what happened? Because this happens a lot.
okay. Um, so like I said, um, Cobians was my family, you know, and for God's sakes, people don't ever look at companies like that. Don't do it. Um,
Not a good thing, right?
but it was, and I never had a bad manager the whole time I was there. Never. I could, and it may be my personality, I can just bring it out. But after COVID had hit, there was a hold on hiring or promotions and all of this. And I had been working as a senior startup specialist for 2 years, and I was ready to get promoted, to the SUPM position, because almost that last 2 years I was working as an SUPM, but in the specialist role. I was okay with that because I was getting my experience. And to me, that is important. I think everybody should do that. I think everybody in the position they're in should at some point work in the job that they're going to be working in before they're promoted into it. Because it gives you the insight of what you're going to be doing. It gives you the experience. You get trained before you're in it without the burden of, okay, here you are, you're in your job, and now everybody's struggling because you don't know what you're doing. And you know what I mean? That's why I just feel like it's important to, to do it. But so they opened up one position, and I think everybody applied for it, right? One SUPM position. I didn't get it. Okay, no big deal. So I waited. I don't remember how, 2-3 months, I don't know. They opened up, some more positions. I applied again, and I got some pretty rough feedback. I don't know if you've seen my my profile, but it says I do work with Bass Pro, right?
I saw that. I saw that.
Yeah. So my work with Bass Pro was, I'd get up on stage, give presentations, teach people how to hunt, how to shoot guns and bows, and all of this stuff. I'm eccentric like that. I can engage the audience. I can do this. So when I interview, I tend to be not nervous, not you know what I mean? So I had to create a PowerPoint presentation, and it wasn't on video, but it was, they could hear me talking, and I just flipped through these slides. And as I'm flipping through, I'm just talking, and, felt like, seamless transition, all the way through. And I made a couple little lighthearted, I wouldn't even call them jokes, like one was I compared a KOL to an Instagram influencer,
Oh, wow.
and
Oh my gosh.
you
The
know,
longer this interview goes, the more I'm like, want to be best friends with you. This is awesome. So
so
lighthearted stuff, like trying to be not even trying to be
engaging.
different, just being yourself, but I get what you're doing.
You want people to remember you. You
Yeah,
want them
yeah,
to, enjoy the presentation.
yeah.
Um,
But who you're
and
presenting to, like the
three
hiring manager?
different, yeah, well, three different SUPMs. They were the
I
ones
see,
that
I
were doing
see,
the hiring.
I
Okay.
see. Did they
And
laugh?
yeah, they giggled both times, because literally
Okay,
just two little things, right?
all right.
But I mean, I was like serious through it. I was professional, you know what I mean? Um,
You could start making memes on LinkedIn.
yeah, right, I should. So I go through, all of, the rest of my presentation. They were like, we don't have any questions. You've covered all the content. Your education is on point. Like, your experience is on point. Like, they didn't have anything, right? So I tell my manager, I was like, I feel like I nailed it, you know? So the feedback that I got was basically that I was too high energy, that
Wow.
sponsors don't like people like that, that
Wow.
I that I came off as immature, because
Wow.
of yeah, um
At least they
that,
gave you honest feedback, right? Like
I mean, what
for
they
them
thought was
from their
honest, I
perspective.
suppose.
Yeah.
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 And that you can't, tell any kind of jokes because sponsors don't like that. And I'm thinking, for 2 years, I've been in SUPM working with sponsors, one of which was in senior escalation, and I got them out of senior escalation. Two of which
Wow.
the SUPM went on medical leave, and they've requested me to take over as the SUPM. So they they obviously like me and like
I
my
mean, they're
work, right?
giving you this feedback as if they don't know you. Like,
I know.
okay, even if let's say you get some buttoned up sponsors, you can just tell, afterwards, say, hey, Stacy, we're gonna hire you because of what you've done. Just maybe like when you're sponsor facing, don't make these jokes. KOLs are
Hmm.
important to them, and it's kind of like their Achilles heel.
Hmm.
Something
Yeah.
like that would have been like appropriate
So it
response.
was hurtful. It was
Wow.
hurtful to
Wow.
my core. And so they said that I wasn't allowed to apply for another year.
Oh my gosh. All the good we said. There goes the sponsorship, Stacy. That's
Yeah, I know.
the
Well,
wow.
and so it was, after that, it was one of those things where I felt like, well, now my professional growth is put on hold.
Do you think that because you were with Covance for like 11 years, right?
Hmm.
Do you think that that incident is reflective of their culture change towards the end of that time period? Like they grew like all the CROs pretty quickly. I think they merged with LabCorp by then, right? Like it was
They
different,
merged with LabCorp in 2017. So they had been with LabCorp the whole time.
but were the people in charge like less fun compared to the beginning of Covance, or like do you think that
So
had to do with it?
I feel like after the merger, there was there was a change that you could see. I mean, you did
That
feel
happens. That happens.
like a little bit of a number instead of, as far as the big picture went.
You see, you used
However,
a family analogy, and that would be like a
however,
divorce or something like a
right.
stepmom coming in.
But but even though, after that merger, like, I still had the best managers. I still had great clinic directors. I still had,
Mm,
HR would still do things for me that, you know, huge
right.
corporations would not do. It was when I say that, I seen a difference, it was when other things would happen. I'm like, man, I just wouldn't have seen Covance do something like that. You know what I mean? But on a
Yeah.
personal standpoint, I would not have, like,
So
I was not expected.
they kept the micro the same, but the
Yeah.
macro is like, hey, you know what? We used to think these jokes are cool, but now it's like we gotta win these bids, these
But
RFP.
I don't believe what
Wow.
happened to me was a reflection of that. I think what happened to me was just maybe their culture, like, like, maybe I just wasn't their flavor, you know what I mean? And that's okay
Wow. So
because
after
I
this
left.
speech, you basically were like, hey, you were told, hey, you can't apply for any jobs like any in the next year, and you were in your head, you're like, I'm out, right? Or no?
And I went to the biggest pharma out there.
Like next day you started looking, like were you that hurt?
I
Or
had
like,
I had already been offered a position, um,
wow.
like, well, not offered it, but I had already been approached.
From the same pharma
Um,
that Covance was worried you would upset with your jokes.
well, I mean,
Same
they
type
said
of
that
pharma.
farmers don't like jokes, so I just went and got on with the bigger thing. So
Jokes on you. Jokes on
yeah.
you, Covance.
So,
Wow,
and not
wow,
not
wow,
not
wow, wow.
Covance, jokes on, the three that told me that,
I
because
see, I see.
that was terrible advice. And,
Wow.
my advice to people, that maybe get feedback like that in an interview is consider your source. You know what I mean? Um,
Uh,
because it's not just because three people can say that to you and be so mean and um
so it's the way they
uh,
delivered it too. It's not
yeah. Yeah.
like the way I would have done it would be like, hey, Stacey, I love it, but we can't put you in front of a sponsor like this. So just you know, we understand you can't do these jokes right all the time, and you would probably say, okay, yeah,
Hmm.
and that's it. That
Yeah,
didn't have to
I
lose
know.
a great employee over that.
Yeah.
Wow.
So yeah, that and that was the reason, you know.
So anyway, then big pharma.
So then, yeah, so then go and I get, a clinical trials manager position, which is basically a startup position just for the US, is kind of what it was.
I see.
Um, and within 1 year, I got promoted within Pfizer for the global
Mm.
SUPM position.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know,
How
they
was that?
obviously liked me.
How was that culture? Like you liked it?
Oh my gosh. I mean, definitely different. I mean,
Yes.
Pfizer culture's different. Um,
They
that's a
have to
different
be.
podcast.
They have to be.
That's a different podcast.
Yeah. But did you like it?
I did. And I really like the people there. Um, they they're very intelligent. Um, they're you have to do things the Pfizer way,
Mm-hmm.
there.
Mm-hmm.
So when you come in, you're kind of told, this is how we operate, and you don't deviate, you know.
But you were work from home also, remote.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm,
I've been home ever since Nashville, or
I
right after I
see.
left
I
Nashville.
see.
Um, but yeah, it was such a great learning experience. And I mean, I would go back in a second, you know, um, just
Wow.
because of everything that I did learn, and all of the different departments that they have, and it's the people, all the stuff all the knowledge that they carry, you know.
Hmm.
Um, I don't know. It's just it was a neat job.
And then from there, you went back to
So
another
then from
CRO.
there, so because I was with Icon, and I was just an FSP,
Ah,
with
I got
Pfizer.
you. Functional service. That's what it's called, right? Functional
Yeah,
service provider.
yeah. So,
I see. So you were
you know,
technically Icon employee, but
yep,
basically a Pfizer employee.
yes, yep.
I got
So
you.
now I am an Icon employee, but now a government employee.
Mm. And you
Yep,
just started that, so you're not sure
yep.
how you like it, but
Yeah.
you're up for the new stuff all the time, right? Like new challenges,
Always,
different
always.
situations. Interesting. And then how does Versatile fit into all this? I feel bad because they, hooked me up
Yeah.
with you, but
Yeah,
I should
so
have found you years ago, Stacy. I don't know what's wrong with me.
yeah, so versatile, like I said, I network. I network all the time. So I'm on LinkedIn, and I'm always trying to help people. I see somebody laid off, and I'm like, hey, what do you do? I might know somebody that's got a position, or
You reach out to
so I
them,
a lot, yeah.
even if you don't
Sometimes
know
they
them.
100%,
Huh.
yeah. And then sometimes they reach out to me, but I don't know. It's just like, especially when I had lost my contract, I was, just kind of job searching around. And if I'd see something, and then I seen somebody laid off, I'm like, hey, I just come across this position, here you go. Or this recruiter reached out to me for this. Here, I got this. Um,
Hmm.
or if I see somebody, like, recruiters will always throw stuff in my inbox.
Oh
So
yeah, yeah.
yeah, I'm like, hey, I'm not interested in this, but I do know somebody that is, and I always throw it, to
You're a
somebody else.
connector now, and
100%.
you just do it because you love
Yeah.
people.
Yeah.
Dang, Stacy. Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. So Versatile, you just saw Mike and them. They're up to like cool stuff.
Yeah.
From a site level, like, oh,
Yeah.
let me just tell you, you
Mhm.
guys will hear a lot more from me about it. Um, okay. And then I guess we give a lot of career advice here, like through the story. I think that's the best way to do
Mhm.
it rather than telling people what to do. You just learn
Yeah.
from Stacey's experiences. That's amazing. We're gonna have to do like
Mhm.
more part two, part
Yeah,
three.
yeah, we do, because I have so many more things to say. Like, this was just such an introduction. Um, but yeah, like,
A lot of those
there's been a lot to my journey.
sidebars can be entire podcasts, like you said,
Yeah.
big pharma versus CRO, and
Yep.
you've never, well, you have worked at the site level. You never
Yep.
worked at a small biotech or like a tech
No.
vendor.
Mm-mm.
Yeah, it's a lot.
Yeah.
lot left for you to do, for you to experiment with if you want.
Yeah. But
Um,
I mean, when I worked for that, medical travel agency, I was sent to nursing homes, doctors' offices, hospitals, so I feel like I've worked at the site, just not on a research
do you miss the
standpoint.
patient interaction?
I miss it when I worked in the first in human, on the research side because those people were so cool. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So yeah, I do. But I think the thing I miss the most, honestly, is when I was a startup specialist working with the coordinators. I miss
Ah, you
that
like that one.
relationship.
So that's why you're on LinkedIn. You're like, hey, coordinator,
Yep. Like I
makes
miss
sense.
that relationship.
It makes sense. It makes sense.
Hmm.
Wow. What a person to connect with. Stacy, everybody go, her LinkedIn's underneath. If you don't find her, apparently she'll find you. So just post stuff on
Right.
LinkedIn. You got to do
Yeah,
memes too. You got to have an outlet for that, creative outlet for the memes.
I know. I
Or
love your memes. I like it when you put your head on things and it bounces around. It's hilarious. Like,
the memes are best when I'm angry. Like, they don't happen often, thank God. But
uh,
when they do, I like open that meme-matic. I'm like, what's my mood right now? And I find something.
mhm,
Yeah, I can't replace that. But thank you so much, Stacy.
yeah,
I really appreciate it. Uh, it's a great interview that I'm so glad we did this. Thank you to
yeah,
Versatile
me
for
too.
setting us up, and we'll do more. We'll do
Hmm.
more.
Yep, yep.
Everybody go follow Stacy, like, subscribe, comment, share. Catch y'all later. Bye bye.